The last time I saw my father's eyes turn cold was at Christmas dinner. The candles flickered across the polished silver, reflecting every angle sharp and unforgiving. My father's voice carried easily over the hum of conversation, low and certain, like a verdict waiting to be written down. "You'll never own a home, Emma," he said, slicing into his roast. "Not in this neighborhood. Not with what you make." Across the table, my brother's laugh chimed in smooth and cruel. "This neighborhood's for the rich, Em. Don't take it personally." I lifted my cup of tea, smiled faintly, and said nothing. What they didn't know was that miles away, Bloomberg's top story already had my name in the headline. The night was extravagant even by my family's standards. The Carters didn't just celebrate Christmas. They performed it. Gold-trimmed garlands spiraled around the staircase, the air thick with cinnamon and the scent of cold marble. A string quartet played softly in the corner, hired for ambience. My father liked to say that music softened people before he delivered the truth. My mother moved from guest to guest, laughing too loudly. Her diamond bracelet a frantic flash every time she gestured toward me. "Emma's still renting in the city," she told one couple, the same way someone might discuss a wayward child. "We're hoping she'll find stability soon." I'd stopped correcting her years ago. Stability in their world meant ownership, the house, the name, the illusion of control. In mine, it meant silence and focus. Every condescending remark at that table had once fueled a long night at my office, sketching the foundations for something far larger than they could imagine. When the main course arrived, my father poured himself another glass of red wine and leaned back. "So," he said, "still at that? Design startup?" His tone made startup sound like a contagious disease. I nodded. "We've expanded into urban development." "Urban," he repeated, savoring the word, like it had an unpleasant aftertaste. "You mean you're working on apartments downtown? I suppose that's noble." My brother laughed again, softer this time, but still sharp. He had my father's smirk, the one that could slice you open without ever raising a voice. "You know, Dad, he said maybe Emma can help with the old Westgate property. They're turning it into affordable housing." She'd fit right in. The table laughed. Even my mother smiled, before realizing I wasn't laughing with them. "It's good work," she said half-heartedly, her tone somewhere between apology and defense. I set my fork down, the silver ringing faintly against the plate. "You're right," I said quietly. "It is good work, especially when it pays off." My father waved a hand. "Oh, come on, Emma. Don't get sensitive. We're just teasing. You know we want the best for you." I'd heard those words all my life, "we want the best for you," and somehow it always meant we know better than you. I smiled. "Of course." Across the table, my brother's wife, Claire, tried to change the subject. "Did anyone see that Bloomberg article today? Something about a new real estate IPO, Astra Development, I think it was." My heart skipped. I reached for my tea. "What about it?" I asked. She scrolled through her phone. "It says they're based here in Chicago, valued at $6.8 billion. That's insane." My father chuckled. "Billion-dollar valuations are like Christmas lights. Flashy temporary. It's the old money that lasts." Claire frowned, still reading. "It says the founder is Emma Carter." The sound of silverware froze. For a moment, the only noise was the ticking of the antique clock on the mantel. My mother blinked. "Excuse me." Claire turned the screen for everyone to see. The Bloomberg headline glowed blue and white: Astra Developments, $6. 8 billion IPO. Surges 300% on opening day. Founder, Emma Carter, becomes real estate's youngest female billionaire. My brother leaned forward, squinting. "That can't be you." I took a slow sip of tea. "Why not?" My father's laugh cracked in half. "Because that would mean he stopped searching for logic that wasn't there." "You're saying you own Astra Development?" I nodded. "Founded it, actually." Silence. It descended heavy and absolute, squeezing the breath from everyone. My mother's face went pale, her diamond bracelet suddenly too bright. "You never said I tried?" I said softly. "You didn't want to hear." My father opened his mouth, closed it again. $6.8 billion, he repeated, as if the number itself was offensive. And the share's up 300%, I said. First day. The quartet in the corner had stopped playing. Even the air seemed to still. My brother pushed his chair back. You let us sit here and tell me I'd never own a home I finished for him. My mother's lip trembled. Emma, we didn't mean I stood slowly folding my napkin beside the untouched dessert plate. I know. You never do. The chandelier light flickered as I reached for my coat. My father rose abruptly. You're walking out now? No, I said, glancing toward the grand windows that framed the snow-dusted skyline. I'm walking up. They followed my gaze to the tallest tower glimmering in the distance, Carter Towers crowned in gold. You own that? My brother whispered. I smiled faintly. Every floor. I turned back to them one last time. Merry Christmas. The door closed behind me with a soft click. Outside, the air was sharp, clean, real. I looked up at the skyline at the lights spelling out the name they'd never thought would belong to me. My father once told me people like us built legacies that lasted generations. He was right. He just didn't realize the legacy would start with me. As snow drifted down onto the quiet streets of Chicago, I breathed in the cold and exhaled years of silence. Inside that house, their laughter had once defined me. Out here, the city did. He never saw my IPO coming. When I woke up the next morning, Chicago was quiet beneath a thin sheet of snow. The city always felt softer after a storm, as if even the skyscrapers were holding their breath. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, 22 missed calls, 9 messages, 3 voicemails. Every one of them carried the same last name. The first voicemail began with my mother's voice, brittle but trying to sound composed. Emma, sweetheart, your father didn't mean what he said last night. It was a misunderstanding. Please call us back. The next was my father's, shorter, clipped. You made quite a scene, young lady. We need to talk about this. Bloomberg situation. Bloomberg situation. As if my billion-dollar IPO was a traffic ticket. The third voicemail was quieter. My brother's voice heavy, uncertain. Emma, I don't even know what to say. Call me, okay? I didn't call anyone. Instead, I opened my curtains and stared at the skyline. Carter Towers stood tall and golden against the pale morning sunlight catching on every mirrored surface. It looked impossibly still, like a cathedral of glass and intention. My name wasn't on it yet, not publicly. The world knew Astra Development, not Emma Carter, the girl her father said would never own a home. I made coffee black and strong and turned on the TV. The Bloomberg anchor's voice confirmed the inevitable. The news had spread fast overnight, every outlet repeating the unbelievable numbers like a new gospel. I muted the TV. I didn't need to hear the rest. They'd already named the tower. My assistant Noah called from the office. You're a global event, Emma. The phones haven't stopped ringing, he said, sounding both thrilled and exhausted. CNBC wants you on live tomorrow. Bloomberg just called again. And the Tribune wants an exclusive. I'm not doing interviews, I said. Emma, this is your moment. You have to. I said no. Silence hummed across the line, filled only by static and his exhale. They're calling you the silent architect. It's everywhere. Hashtag Emma Carter IPO is trending #1. I smiled faintly. Then let them talk. I hung up and sat in the quiet for a long time. Fame was just noise. I'd spent years building Astra in silence, away from the parties and the networking, away from people who measured worth by square footage. I wasn't about to start performing now. By noon, my inbox was flooded. Congratulations from investors, requests for partnerships, invitations from people who had never returned my calls before, and then an email from my father. Subject family. I hovered over it for a long moment before clicking. Emma, I'd like to have dinner tonight. Just the family. Let's clear the air. Dad. No apology. No acknowledgement. Just a command disguised as an invitation. I closed the laptop. At 5 that evening, the sun was already setting over the frozen river. I drove toward the city, not to their house, to mine. Carter Towers loomed ahead, wrapped in gold light, as if the building itself was awake. The lobby staff nodded when I walked in, their smiles polite but knowing. "Evening, Ms. Carter," the concierge said. "Congratulations." The word congratulations sounded strange, too light for the weight I felt. I took the elevator to the top floor to the penthouse that wasn't listed under my name. I had bought it under a holding company years ago before the foundation was even finished. It wasn't luxury. It was insurance. A reminder that power built quietly was the kind that lasted. The door opened to floor-to-ceiling windows, and the city stretched below me. I could see everything from here: the frozen lake, the train lines, the tiny glow of the Carter family mansion in the distance. For a moment I thought of my father sitting at that long dining table, probably nursing the same glass of wine, pretending the world hadn't just changed around him. Noah arrived 20 minutes later, holding 2 paper cups. "I brought coffee," he said. "Figured you'd need it more than bubbly right now." I took one. "You figured it out." He glanced around the penthouse. "So this is it, the view from the top." "Feels the same as the view from the bottom," I said, sipping, just quieter. Noah leaned on the railing. "You think they'll call again? They already have." He hesitated. "You gonna go?" I looked out toward the mansion, the faint glow of Christmas lights blinking through the snow. "Not tonight." He nodded, understanding more than I said. "They'll come around. Everyone does when the balance changes." Maybe I said softly, "But I didn't build this to balance anything. I built it to stand." The city below us shimmered in the twilight. I remembered the early years' nights spent in an empty warehouse with only blueprints and takeout boxes, pitching ideas to investors who looked past me because my last name meant nothing. Or worse, because it meant too much. I'd gone to them as Emma Carter, and they'd smiled the way my father smiled when he thought I was dreaming too big. So I stopped using my name, started using results instead. The elevator chimed behind us. My phone buzzed again, this time a notification from Bloomberg. Breaking Astra Development's IPO. Marks historic shift in real estate leadership. Founder Emma Carter's vision reshapes Chicago's skyline. I stared at the screen for a long moment before turning it off. Noah watched me. "You okay?" "Yeah," I said. "Just thinking how strange it feels when silence gets this loud." He smiled. "You've earned it." I wasn't so sure, because beneath the pride was something else, a quiet ache, the residual pain of having to prove everything. Outside, the snow began to fall again, heavy and soft, blanketing the city in silver. I pressed my palm against the glass, feeling the cold through it. I closed my eyes and let the silence settle. Success wasn't a sound. It was a stillness, the kind you earn after years of noise. And somewhere between the snow and the city lights, I finally understood what I'd been building all along. Not towers, peace. The first knock came on a Sunday morning, sharp and deliberate, echoing through my apartment like a reminder. I almost ignored it. But when I opened the door, my mother stood there wrapped in a wool coat, far too elegant for the cold, clutching a silver gift bag, like it could explain everything. "Emma," she said softly, her breath fogging in the hallway. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside. She walked in slowly, her heels clicking against the hardwood like they were measuring the distance between us. The city light spilled through the windows, casting a faint reflection of Carter Towers on the glass behind her. For a moment, she looked at the skyline, and then at me like she couldn't decide which version of her daughter was real. "I brought something," she said, setting the bag on the counter. "Your grandmother's scarf. She wanted you to have it." I raised an eyebrow. "Grandma passed away 5 years ago." "I know," she whispered. "I kept it. I thought I'd give it to you, when things were better." I felt the weight of that silence, the years she'd held onto the small proof of her own quiet regret. She took off her gloves, folding them neatly on the counter. "Your father's been shaken," she said finally. "He didn't sleep for 2 nights. Keeps pacing the study, muttering about IPOs and news anchors." I smiled faintly. "I can imagine." Her eyes softened. "He's proud, you know." "Is that what that was at dinner?" She sighed, the kind of sigh that carries decades of unspoken things. "Your father doesn't know how to be proud quietly. It comes out as control." "Cruelty," I corrected. She winced. Maybe both. For the first time, she looked small. Not the sharp, unshakable woman who hosted holiday dinners with diamond confidence, just a person standing in the ruins of her own certainty. "I came to ask if you'd meet with him," she said. "He wants to talk." "Does he?" She nodded. "He's embarrassed. But he'll never say that." "I know." She hesitated, glancing again toward the skyline. "Emma, we didn't know. We didn't understand what you were building." "That's because you never asked," I said quietly. "You were too busy telling me what wasn't possible." Her lips trembled, and for a second I saw something unfamiliar: guilt. Real, unguarded guilt. "We thought we were protecting you," she whispered. "We wanted you to be realistic." "Realistic," I repeated. "You mean small." The words hung in the air, sharp and echoing. She didn't deny them. I turned away, walking toward the window. "You remember the year I told you I wanted to design skyscrapers?" She smiled weakly. "You were 12. You drew one on the back of your math homework. And you said, 'Sweetheart, girls don't build cities. They decorate them.'" Her shoulders fell. I was wrong. The simplicity of it hit me harder than I expected. I looked back at her. "You were." She nodded, eyes glistening. "And I'm sorry." The apology came out, uneven, fragile, but real. I let it sit there for a while between us until the sound of the city outside filled the silence. When I finally spoke, my voice was calm. "Tell him I'll come by tomorrow." Her relief was instant visible. "Thank you, Emma." "Don't thank me," I said. "Just listen this time." She nodded again, then turned to leave. But before she reached the door, she paused, her hand resting on the handle. "You know," she said softly, "when I saw your name on that Bloomberg article, I didn't recognize you. And then I realized I'd never really tried to." The door closed gently behind her. For a long time I stood in the quiet, the scent of her perfume still lingering in the air, softer now, almost nostalgic. I opened the silver bag. Inside was a folded ivory scarf, worn but carefully kept, the kind my grandmother used to wear on cold Sundays when she'd take me to the park. I remembered her voice, her hands warm around mine as she said, "The world doesn't give you permission, Emma. You build your own door." I smiled faintly. Maybe she had seen me all along. The next morning I drove to my parents' house. Snow flurries caught the light like glitter in the air. The same driveway I used to dread now felt like neutral ground. The door opened before I could knock. My father stood there, older somehow, not in years but in weight. His voice was quieter than I remembered. "Emma. Dad." He gestured for me to come in. The house looked different without the Christmas lights stripped of its shine. The grand dining room sat empty, the polished table reflecting only the winter light. We sat in the study, the room where he used to lecture me about ambition and failure. The fire crackled softly. He poured himself a drink, but didn't offer one to me, an old habit he probably didn't notice. "I suppose I owe you an apology," he said after a long pause. "You do." He nodded, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. "You made a fool of me." I looked at him steadily. "No, Dad. You did that yourself." His jaw tightened. "You know, I always thought confidence was your biggest flaw. Turns out it was your strength. That's usually how it works." He chuckled bitterly. $6.8 billion. "Closer to 7 now," I said. "The market's strong." He stared at the fire, the amber light catching the fatigue beneath his eyes. "I never thought I'd be jealous of my own daughter. That's not what this is about." "No," he said, shaking his head slowly. "It's about how wrong I was. About you. About everything." He set his glass down and met my eyes. "You built something real, Emma. Bigger than me. Bigger than this family. And you did it without asking for permission." For a moment I saw something flicker, pride stripped of its arrogance. "I don't need your apology," I said softly. "I just need your respect." He nodded once. "You have it." The words landed gently but heavy, like the last snow of the season. When I left, the wind had picked up. I pulled the scarf tighter around my neck, my grandmother's scarf, and looked back at the house one last time. The lights in the study were still glowing. Maybe for the first time, so was he. I didn't plan on seeing my brother again so soon. But life rarely respects the architect's schedule, and Marcus Carter arrived right as the first real snow of January began to fall over Chicago. The receptionist buzzed me. "Ms. Carter, your brother's here. He says it's important." I hesitated before answering. "Send him up." When the elevator doors opened, Marcus walked in like he still owned every room he entered. Perfect suit, perfect hair. But his eyes looked tired, the kind of tired that no amount of money or privilege could fix. "Nice place," he said, glancing around my office. The skyline stretched behind me through a wall of glass. Carter Towers reflected in the window opposite my name, faint but undeniable in the golden letters. "Bigger than I expected." I smiled. "That's what people usually say." He gave a short, humorless laugh. "You've been busy." "For years," I replied. "You just weren't watching." He sat down across from me, uninvited. "Look, I didn't come here to fight." "Then what did you come for?" "To talk," he said. "And maybe to understand." Marcus leaned forward, elbows on his knees, like he was about to negotiate a deal. After Christmas, everything changed. People keep asking questions that bored my clients, even Dad's golf buddies. They all want to know if it's true. If my sister's the one behind Astra Development. And what do you tell them? "That's complicated," he said. "Which it is, isn't it?" I tilted my head. "No, Marcus. It's simple. I built something. You didn't see it." He exhaled slowly, rubbing his temples. "You don't understand the pressure this has put on the family. Dad's name is everywhere. Mom won't stop crying. Investors keep calling me thinking I can get access to you. Maybe they should try asking me directly." He looked up sharply. "Emma, that's not how this world works." "Then maybe that's the problem." We sat in silence for a moment, the city hum filling the room. He studied me not like a brother but like a rival trying to gauge an opponent's next move. "You really did it," he said finally. "You actually built all this. The towers, the IPO, everything." "I told you I would." He shook his head, half in disbelief, half in regret. "I used to think you were reckless. I thought you'd burn out before 30. "I did," I said quietly. "Just not the way you expected." He leaned back, the leather chair creaking. "You humiliated Dad." I met his gaze evenly. No. Dad humiliated himself. I just stopped protecting him from the truth. He looked away. "You know, when we were kids, he used to say you were the emotional one, the dreamer. I was the one who'd carry the Carter legacy. And yet," I said, gesturing toward the skyline behind me, "there it is." Marcus's jaw tightened. "Don't do that. Do what turned this into some morality play where you're the hero and we're the villains." "I don't see villains," I said softly. "Just people who refuse to believe I could win without their permission." He looked at me for a long time, then laughed quietly. "You sound just like her." "Like who, Grandma?" The name hit me like a forgotten song. "She believed in me," I said. "She believed in everyone," he replied. "That's what made her dangerous." I smiled faintly. "She called that faith, not danger." Marcus shifted in his chair. "You know, I didn't hate you for being successful. I hated that you didn't tell me. Would you have believed me if I had?" He hesitated, then sighed. "Probably not." The honesty caught me off guard. He looked down at his hands. "When I saw your name on that Bloomberg headline, I wasn't angry. I was jealous. Not because you had money, but because you were free. You didn't need their approval anymore. For a moment, I saw the boy he used to be, sharp, scared, desperate to please our father. I remembered him standing in front of me when I was 12, telling me to be realistic. "Marcus," I said gently, "you can be free too. But you have to stop living in Dad's reflection." He laughed softly. "You think it's that easy?" "No," I said. "But it's possible." He stared out the window, the city lights flickering against the glass. "You know, they say revenge is sweet." "It's not," I said. "It's quiet. And once the quiet comes, all that's left is peace if you let it." He turned back to me. "Do you have peace, Emma?" I paused. "I'm working on it." We sat in silence again, the kind that wasn't angry or uncomfortable, just real. After a while, he stood. You know, Dad wants to sell the lake house. Says it feels too big now. Mom wants to downsize. I nodded. Let them. Sometimes you have to let go of walls before you can build anything new. He smiled faintly. You really think in blueprints, don't you? Always have. He walked to the door, then turned back. You ever think about what she'd say, Grandma, I mean? She'd probably tell us both to stop talking and get back to work, I said. He laughed for real this time, a sound I hadn't heard from him in years. Yeah, probably. As he reached for the elevator button, he paused again. Emma, I'm proud of you. I just wish I'd known who you were becoming. I looked at him, the ache in my chest both heavy and clean. You do now. I used to fear sounding like him. Now I only feared becoming him and realized that fear had already been the foundation of my success. He nodded once, then disappeared behind the closing doors. When he was gone, I turned back to the window. The snow was falling harder now, the city below blurred into silver and gold. I pressed my hand to the glass, tracing the outline of Carter Towers through the frost. In the reflection, I saw two faces, mine and his, overlapping for a moment before fading into the skyline. Maybe the reckoning wasn't just for them. Maybe it was for me too. Because forgiveness, I realized, doesn't always begin with an apology. Sometimes it begins with understanding why it was ever needed at all. The invitation came in a white envelope with gold lettering slipped beneath my office door like a secret. Bloomberg Television. A conversation with Emma Carter, founder of Astra Development. I stared at it for a long moment before opening it. The producer's note was handwritten, elegant, and persistent. Your story changed the industry. Now it's time the world hears it from you. I'd spent my whole career avoiding microphones. Success for me had always been silent. But something about the timing, the tone of the world's curiosity felt different now. They didn't just want to see my numbers. They wanted to know the woman behind them. When I walked into the studio that Friday morning, the air buzzed with the faint hum of lights and whispered directions. The anchor, a woman named Renee, greeted me with the kind of smile that said she already knew the headlines, but wanted to find the heartbeat beneath them. Emma Carter, she said, shaking my hand. The woman who built towers without consulting the foundations laid by others. Thank you for being here. I smiled. Thank you for asking. We sat across from each other in a minimalist set, framed by a view of the Chicago skyline. I caught the faint reflection of Carter Towers in the window behind her. The irony wasn't lost on me. Renee glanced at her notes. You've been called a disruptor, a visionary, even a mystery. But you haven't spoken publicly since Astra's IPO. Why now? Because timing matters, I said simply. You can build in silence, but when the world starts talking for you, you either correct the story or live with the wrong one. She nodded, leaning forward. Let's correct it then. You founded Astra Development at 26. 5 years later, it's worth nearly $7 billion. How did that happen? I took a breath. By not asking for permission. The crew went still, cameras humming. I continued, my voice steady. When I started Astra, I wasn't building skyscrapers. I was building a way out. My parents believed ownership defined worth. I believed creation did. I wanted to redefine what power looked like, especially for women who were told to stay small. Renee smiled slightly. And now? Now I realized the only conversation that mattered was the one I had with the blueprint. She tapped her pen thoughtfully. Let's talk about that dinner, the one that went viral. Your family dinner on Christmas Eve. People say it was the moment you claimed your power. I almost laughed. Power isn't claimed in a moment. It's built brick by brick, insult by insult. That dinner was just the unveiling. Renee hesitated, then said softly, Did it hurt? Yes, I said. Every word, every doubt. But pain can be productive if you build with it instead of bleeding from it. The silence that followed was electric. For the first time, I saw something shift in her expression, empathy, not curiosity. Some would call that revenge, she said. I shook my head. Revenge fades. Structure stays. I didn't want revenge. I wanted a foundation. She smiled faintly. Foundation. That's beautiful. I shrugged lightly. It's also functional. The crew laughed quietly behind the cameras. Renee turned serious again. You've become a symbol for a lot of women, especially those who've been dismissed or underestimated. What do you say to them? I looked straight into the lens, into the unseen millions beyond it. I say don't wait for validation. Build without applause. One day they'll see it, and when they do, don't shrink to make them comfortable. Let them adjust their sightlines. Her eyes glistened. You speak like someone who's already made peace with the past. I'm learning to, I said softly. Peace isn't a destination. It's a habit. Every day I choose not to prove, not to defend, not to explain, just to continue. The red tally light above the lens went dark. We have 1 minute, a producer whispered. Renee set down her notes. Before we wrap, one last question. Who is Emma Carter today? I paused, considering. A builder. Still. The director's voice called, and we're clear. Applause rippled across the room, quiet but warm. Renee leaned closer. That was incredible. You know, this is going to blow up, right? I smiled. Then let it. Maybe it'll build something good in the process. As the crew began to pack up, a young woman from the production team approached shyly. Ms. Carter. Can I just say that line about building without applause? I needed to hear that. I thanked her, and as she walked away, I felt something shift, the kind of recognition that didn't need headlines or IPOs. Just human connection. Later that evening, the interview aired. My phone lit up with messages, hundreds of them. Investors, colleagues, strangers. But one stood out for my father. You spoke well. Your mother cried. I did too. Proud of you, kid. Dad. I stared at it for a long time, unsure what to feel. Then another message came through, this one from an unknown number. Ms. Carter, my name's Lena Morales. I'm 22 studying architecture. I saw your interview. My parents always told me women don't belong in real estate. You changed that. Thank you. I smiled heart tight. I typed back, keep building, Lena. One day they'll ask for your blueprints. That night I walked out onto the balcony of my penthouse, the city alive beneath me. Snow drifted in soft spirals over Chicago, wrapping the skyline in light. Carter Towers stood tall, unbothered by the cold. I whispered to the night, to the echoes of every voice that had doubted me. Look what silence built. And for the first time, I didn't feel the need to look back. The envelope arrived on a Monday morning, heavy stock, embossed Seal Carter family crest. For a second, I thought it was another legal document or some half-hearted apology wrapped in formality. But inside was a single card, thick and cream-colored, written in my mother's handwriting. Emma, your father's retirement dinner will be held at the Grand Ashbury Hotel this Friday. We'd like you to come. Please. There was no flourish, no manipulation, no guilt. Just a plea wrapped in politeness. I set it on my desk beside a stack of contracts for a new downtown development. The two worlds looked absurd next to each other, the future I built, and the past still asking for permission to join it. I didn't want to go, but something in the way she'd written please pulled me back. Not desperate, not performative, just human. Friday came faster than I expected. The Grand Ashbury's ballroom shimmered in gold and candlelight, a mirror of every Carter event I'd once dreaded. The difference was that this time the whispers weren't about my failures. They were about my fortune. I arrived late deliberately. I wanted them to feel it, the quiet power of not needing to rush. The maitre d' led me to the family table near the center. My father stood as I approached. For a second, I saw hesitation flicker across his face before he masked it with a practiced smile. Emma, he said. You came. I did. He looked older. Retirement didn't suit him. It softened the armor he'd spent decades polishing. My mother hugged me lightly, the scent of vanilla and champagne lingering in the air. Thank you for being here, she whispered. My brother Marcus sat across from me, his wife beside him. He gave me a small nod, cautious but genuine. Dinner unfolded slowly. Speeches, laughter, the soft clinking of glasses. My father looked almost happy, his ego fed by stories of his career, decades of deals, accolades, and perfectly polished memories. Then halfway through dessert, the master of ceremonies tapped the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, before we close, we have a very special guest who's requested a few words." I froze. My father turned toward me with a look I hadn't seen since childhood, half challenge, half dare. "Emma," the host said, "would you care to say something to your father?" 1,000 eyes turned to me. I could have refused. I almost did. But something inside me, maybe the child who'd always wanted to be heard, stood up. The microphone felt colder than I expected. "Thank you," I began. My voice is steady. When I was younger, my father used to say that success isn't ownership. It's rented, and the rent is due every day. He was right. The room stilled. My father blinked, uncertain where this was going. "I spent years trying to pay that rent," I continued. "Trying to earn a place at a table I was told I wasn't ready for. And then one day I realized I didn't need the table. I could build one." A few murmurs rippled through the crowd. I saw Marcus look down, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "My father built his career on precision," I said, "on knowing the value of everything. He taught me numbers, timing, and leverage. What he didn't realize was that he was teaching me something else too, how to stand alone." My father's jaw tightened, but his eyes didn't leave mine. "I'm grateful for that," I said softer now. "Because without those lessons, I wouldn't be standing here tonight, not as the daughter who disappointed him, but as the woman who learned from him. I built my life on the foundations he gave me, even the cracks." The audience exhaled a soft wave of silence, breaking into polite applause. I handed the microphone back and sat down. My mother's hand found mine under the table, trembling slightly. My father stared at his drink for a long moment before clearing his throat. "That was something," he said. "It was honest," I replied. He nodded, once the faintest hint of a smile in the corner of his mouth. "You always were." When the dinner ended, the guests filtered out into the marble hallway, murmuring about legacy and family. My father lingered behind, staring at the empty stage. He turned to me as I reached for my coat. "Walk with me." We stepped outside into the winter air. The city lights shimmered across the frozen street headlights, streaking past like brief sparks of gold. "You embarrassed me again," he said quietly. I laughed, startled. "That wasn't my intention." "I know," he said. "That's why it worked." We stood in silence for a while. The hotel awning glowed above us, snow beginning to fall in soft, slow spirals. "You built something I don't understand," he said finally. "And maybe that's my fault. Maybe it's just different languages," I said. He smiled faintly. "You sound like your grandmother." I looked up at the falling snow. "That's the best compliment you've ever given me." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "This was hers," he said, handing it to me. Inside was a gold compass, the glass face scratched and the needle permanently magnetized north. She carried it every day, said it helped her remember where she was going. I closed the lid gently. "Thank you. She'd be proud," he said. "Not because of the money, but because you didn't let us define you." The words hung between us like breath in the cold. When he walked back toward the hotel, I stayed on the sidewalk, the compass warm in my hand. Across the street, Carter Towers glowed in the distance, steady, unshaken, alive. For the first time, I didn't see it as proof. I saw it as a reminder. Sometimes you don't need to rebuild the past. You just need to let it recognize you when it finally looks up. I slipped the compass into my coat pocket, took a deep breath, and started walking, not away, not back, just forward. The restaurant was all glass and marble, perched above the Chicago River like a stark, gilded blueprint of ambition. Every table hummed with power, but the tension was structurally unsound. I'd been here before years ago as a quiet observer in borrowed heels, taking notes for someone else's pitch. Tonight I wasn't observing. I was the reason everyone was here. The maitre d' led me through the maze of tables to a private room overlooking the skyline. 5 of the most powerful investors in the city waited there, 3 men, 2 women, all dressed in variations of confidence. They stood when I entered, their faces a mix of charm and calculation. "Ms. Carter," one of them said, extending his hand. "Or should I say, the woman of the year?" I smiled, shaking his hand. "Emma's fine." We sat. Champagne was poured, small talk began, and for a few minutes it was all pleasant choreography. Market trends, mutual funds, polite laughter. Then the waiter disappeared, and the tone shifted the way it always did when money became real. The eldest among them, Mr. Lang, leaned forward, fingers steepled. "So, Astra Development. 7 billion valuation, expanding across 3 cities. Congratulations. But we're curious what's next." I looked at the skyline behind him, the reflection of Carter Towers gleaming in the glass. "Legacy," I said simply. Lang raised an eyebrow. "Legacy doesn't pay dividends." "It depends how you define them," I said. The youngest investor, a woman named Arya Patel, smiled slightly. "You're talking about expansion." "I'm talking about transformation," I said. "We're not just developing properties anymore, we're developing possibilities. Smart housing, renewable infrastructure, a city that breathes." The table went quiet. It wasn't the kind of pitch they expected. It wasn't a promise of higher returns or faster exits. It was bigger, too big for the language they lived in. One of the men, a venture capitalist named Dorsey, leaned back, smirking. "That's poetic, Emma, but the market's driven by numbers, not feelings." I held his gaze. "Numbers are just tools. I decide what value they measure." A faint chuckle rippled across the table, but Arya didn't laugh. She studied me like someone who understood exactly what I meant. "You're talking about social equity," she said. "I'm talking about rebalancing values," I said. "The next decade isn't about ownership, it's about access. People don't just want buildings anymore, they want to belong." Lang sighed. "Belonging doesn't build profit." "Neither did vision," I said, until someone dared to measure it. The silence that followed wasn't hostile, it was curious. They were assessing risk, not dismissing it, which meant I had them. I continued, my voice steady but warm. "Astra will launch Echelon City, an urban initiative built on renewable systems and modular architecture. We'll partner with universities and women-led startups. The return won't just be financial, it'll be generational." Dorsey frowned. "You're mixing philanthropy with business." "I'm aligning them," I said. "For too long, success has been about extraction. I'm interested in creation." The waiter reappeared with entrees, breaking the tension. Plates clinked, wine was poured. I didn't touch mine. I could feel the pulse of the conversation shifting, the resistance softening into intrigue. Lang finally said, "You're asking us to invest in your philosophy." "No," I said, smiling. "I'm asking you to invest in the future. My philosophy just happens to build it." Arya set down her glass. "I'm in." The others looked at her, surprised. She met my eyes. "You remind me of someone I used to be before I learned to lower my voice in boardrooms." I smiled. "Then maybe it's time you raised it again." Lang leaned back, thoughtful. "You realize if this fails, you'll be the one holding the headline." "I've had worse headlines," I said. "They tend to age well." By dessert, 2 more investors had agreed to sign on. Dorsey hadn't spoken again. His silence said enough, the kind that meant grudging respect. When the dinner ended, I walked them out to the lobby. The city glowed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, a reflection of everything I'd built and everything I was still trying to. Arya lingered behind. "You know they're scared of you, right?" she said quietly. "Good," I said. "Fear is the first step toward understanding." She smiled. "You're not building buildings anymore, Emma. You're building a narrative." "Same thing," I said. "Just different materials." Outside, the wind bit at the edges of my coat as I stepped onto the sidewalk. The cold felt clean, almost clarifying. Across the river, Carter Towers shimmered like a promise. My phone buzzed, a text from my mother. "Dinner looked lovely. Your father saw the news about your new project. He said he's impressed." A second later, another message. He also said, "You've become someone he doesn't understand." I told him that was the point. I stared at the screen for a long moment, a laugh catching in my throat. Then another text arrived, this one from Marcus. "You're shaking the city again. Grandma would be proud." I typed back, "She taught us how to build storms, not hide from them." As I walked toward my car, snow began to fall, soft but relentless. The streetlights turned the flakes to gold, and the city looked almost alive, breathing, expanding, reflecting. For a moment I stopped and looked back at the skyline. Every tower, every light, every window felt like a heartbeat. Legacy wasn't about what I owned, it was about what I dared to imagine. And that night, under the quiet Chicago snow, I knew I wasn't done imagining yet. It was supposed to be a simple meeting, one final negotiation before Astra's Echelon City project officially broke ground. But I should have known better. When my father asked to join, simplicity became impossible. The conference room on the 42nd floor of Carter Towers was all glass, steel, and light, a perfect place for transparency, which made it ironic. My legal team sat at one end of the table, 2 city officials at the other. In the middle, my father wearing a navy suit that carried the weight of old money and older pride. He didn't speak until the meeting began. "My daughter," he said to the officials, his tone casual but sharp, "has always been a dreamer. Sometimes she forgets that cities don't run on dreams. They run on numbers." I smiled politely, my voice calm. "Dreams are where numbers begin." The officials exchanged looks, uncertain whether this was business or theater. The discussion moved on zoning permits, environmental assessments, projected yields. My father interrupted every third sentence, subtly undermining, without ever appearing rude. "That's an ambitious projection," he'd murmur. "Or perhaps a little optimism could be balanced with experience." He was performing, and I knew his audience. The city representatives respected him. He'd been part of Chicago's development board for decades. But this wasn't his world anymore. It was mine. Finally, when the last slide of the presentation ended, I leaned forward. "Gentlemen, you've seen the numbers. You've seen the impact. The city needs housing that breathes, not just buildings that sell." One of the officials nodded. "We agree. The proposal is strong." My father's jaw tightened. "Strong ideas don't always make stable investments." I looked directly at him. "Neither did your golf club memberships, but you seemed comfortable risking those." The officials tried not to smile. "Emma," he said evenly, "I'm trying to keep you from overextending yourself." By sabotaging my credibility in front of the city board, he froze. The silence snapped like a structural cable under too much pressure. After the meeting, the others excused themselves, offering handshakes and polite smiles that carried too much tension. When the door finally closed, it was just the 2 of us, father and daughter, founder and former king. He turned toward the window, hands behind his back. "You embarrassed me," he said quietly. "You embarrassed yourself," I said, "by pretending this was your table." He spun around. "Watch your tone." "No," I said, standing. "You don't get to control that anymore." His expression hardened. "You think because you have a few billion in paper value you can lecture me about control? I built this city while you were still learning how to spell your name." I stepped closer, voice low but steady. "You built your reputation on ownership. I built mine on creation. The city doesn't remember who paid for the land, Dad. It remembers who shaped the skyline." He laughed bitterly. "You really believe that all of this will last?" "Yes," I said, "because it was built on something real. Not arrogance, not inheritance. Work." He moved closer, his eyes narrow. "You're rewriting history, Emma. This tower, your company, you'd have none of it if I hadn't given you your start." I met his gaze. "You didn't give me a start. You gave me a story to overcome." For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The hum of the city below filled the silence. He looked older than I remembered, not physically, but in the way men look when they realize time no longer answers to them. "You're my daughter," he said finally. "No matter what you build, you'll always be my reflection." I shook my head. "Then maybe it's time you looked in a different mirror." He stared at me for several seconds before walking to the door. "You'll regret talking to me this way one day." I smiled faintly. "I already have." That's why I stopped. He didn't reply. The door clicked shut behind him, leaving the echo of everything we'd never said. I sank into the nearest chair and stared out at the skyline. The city glowed beneath a wash of gray clouds, endless windows catching the late light. Somewhere down there, people were living their lives in spaces I'd helped design, spaces built on the belief that dignity could exist in every square foot. My phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. Heard Dad came to the meeting. You okay? Fine, I wrote back. He came to make a point. I made one louder. Marcus replied almost immediately. You've always been louder. Grandma would have called that clarity. I smiled. As evening fell, I went downstairs to the plaza. Workers were installing the first model of an Echelon City microhome, the prototype that would mark the beginning of our next phase. A young architect named Lena, the same one who'd written to me months ago, was standing near the site giving instructions. When she saw me, her face lit up. Ms. Carter, I didn't expect you tonight. I wanted to see it before the press did. She gestured proudly at the structure. We call it Unit 1. It's efficient, fully sustainable, and costs less than a mid-range sedan. I ran my hand along the steel frame. It felt strong, purposeful. It's beautiful, I said. You did this. Her eyes brightened. You inspired it. For a moment, I forgot the argument, the headlines, the endless noise of competition. Here was the reason I'd started, not to prove, but to build. Lena hesitated. Is it true what the papers say? That your father's fighting you on the project? I looked toward the skyline where Carter Towers rose like quiet defiance. He doesn't understand it yet. But one day he will. She smiled. My father doesn't understand me either. He thinks architecture's for men. Then show him what a woman can build, I said. As she turned back to her team, I stood there in the fading light, the hum of the city steady around me. Power didn't come from control or lineage. It came from creation, from turning every bruise into a blueprint. The confrontation was over. But the building, the real building, had only just begun. By the time I reached the office the next morning, the world already knew. Every screen in the lobby blazed with the same headline, Astra Development Faces Internal Conflict, Founder's Father Opposes Landmark City Deal. Below it, a photograph of me walking out of the conference room, chin-high, expression unreadable. My father's face blurred in the background, mid-gesture, looking every bit the man who'd lost control of his own empire. Noah met me at the elevator holding 2 coffees and a face full of worry. They're spinning it everywhere, Emma, the financial sheets, the political columns. Don't look at the comments, especially not the Tribune. Of course they did, I said. Personal sales are better than progress. He handed me the coffee, still hot. The board wants a statement. And Bloomberg called again. They want you on air tonight to clarify your position. My position hasn't changed, I said. I build. He objects. End of story. Noah gave me that look that meant I wasn't wrong, but I wasn't being strategic either. Emma, this could rattle investors. Half of them still think your father has influence here. Then let them remember who's signing the checks. I stepped into my office. The city sprawled below me, glittering, humming, alive. But beneath that shine, I could feel the undercurrent tension, speculation, the delicious chaos the media mistook for substance. The phone on my desk rang. My father's number. I let it ring. Instead, I opened my laptop. Emails flooded in, journalists asking for quotes, PR teams begging for directions, strangers offering advice I didn't need. But amid the noise, one message caught my eye. Subject Proud doesn't even begin to cover it. It was from Arya Patel, the investor who'd backed me at the dinner. They'll try to spin this as a family drama. Don't let them. You're redefining legacy, Emma. The men who built the old skyline will hate it. That's how you know you're doing it right. I smiled. I'd stopped needing approval, but truth still had a way of steadying me. By noon, the story had spread beyond Chicago. CNBC ran a panel about the dangers of family control in modern business. One analyst called me brilliant but volatile. Another suggested I was a product of inherited arrogance. I muted the TV and stared at the city instead. Across the river, Carter Towers shimmered under the pale winter light, my name now engraved in gold at the top. Noah entered again, looking hesitant. You're trending again. Twitter, TikTok, everywhere. What about this time? He sighed. They're saying you outbuilt him. I leaned back in my chair. Catchy. He hesitated. Do you want to issue a denial? No, I said. Let them write whatever version they need. The truth will outlast the noise. I picked up my phone and called the one journalist I trusted, the one who'd covered Astra's IPO months ago. Julia, I said when she answered. You want the real story? She didn't miss a beat. Always. Come to the site this afternoon. Echelon City. Bring a camera. When I arrived at the construction zone, the wind was sharp enough to sting. The foundation had just been poured wet concrete that would one day hold homes for hundreds. Lena waved from across the lot. Hard hat, slightly crooked face flushed with cold. You're trending again, she said when I reached her. Apparently that's my job now. She laughed. Want me to tell the workers they're building the world's most controversial neighborhood? Tell them they're building the future, I said. It's less catchy but more accurate. Julia arrived with a cameraman. We walked the perimeter together, my boots crunching on frozen gravel. She asked, so what do you want to say to the people calling this a family feud? That it's not about family, I said. It's about evolution. My father built within boundaries. I'm building beyond them. And what about the criticism that you're moving too fast? Progress has never waited for permission, I said. Her eyes glinted with that journalist's hunger for a line worth printing. Can I quote that? Please do. We stood near the corner of the site where a temporary sign read, Echelon City Phase 1 Foundations. Look, I said, pointing to the wet cement. That's the story. Not the arguments or the headlines. This. What's being created here will outlast both of us. Later that evening, Julia's article went live. Emma Carter responds to criticism. Progress has never waited for permission. It spread faster than the scandal ever had. Suddenly, the narrative wasn't about rebellion, it was about reinvention. Investors stabilized the markets, steadied, and even the Tribune's follow-up headline softened. From conflict to vision, the woman redefining Chicago's skyline. That night as I left the office, the phone rang again. This time I answered. Emma. My father's voice said heavy with something that wasn't anger anymore. You made your point. It wasn't a point, Dad, I said. It was a project. He sighed. The board's been calling me all day. You've made quite an impression. I didn't do it to impress you. I know. He paused. But you did anyway. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The line buzzed softly between us, two stubborn architects of the same bloodline finally finding quiet. Before he hung up, he said, Your grandmother would have liked that article? I know, I whispered. She would have framed it. I ended the call and stood there for a long time watching the snow fall over the river, the city lights reflecting off the water. Across the skyline, the glow of Carter Towers and the cranes of Echelon City stood side by side, old legacy and new colliding, yet connected. For the first time, I didn't feel like I was fighting my past. I was simply building on it higher, cleaner, stronger. Let them write their headlines, I thought. I was too busy writing blueprints. The invitation came from my mother this time, handwritten again, but different. No formal tone, no embossed crest. Just 4 simple words. Come home for dinner. I hadn't been to the Carter mansion in over 2 years. Even thinking about it stirred 1,000 small ghosts' laughter that turned to lectures, warmth that curdled into judgment. But when I parked in front of the tall iron gates that night, I realized something had shifted. It wasn't fear anymore. It was far away. The house looked smaller somehow, not physically, but emotionally, as if time had shrunk it back to scale. I rang the bell and the door opened before I could breathe twice. My mother stood there wearing a soft gray sweater instead of her usual pearls and composure. Emma, she said, her voice calm. You came. Of course I did. She smiled faintly and stepped aside. Dinner's ready. The dining room was familiar and foreign at once. The heavy oak table gleamed under the chandelier, but the air felt less rigid and staged. There were only 4 place settings, mine, my parents', and Marcus's. My brother was already there, leaning back in his chair with a half smile. "Hey, mogul," he said. "Still too busy for family dinners," I smirked. "Only for boring ones." He laughed, and the tension broke just enough to make it feel almost normal. We ate quietly for the first few minutes, roast chicken, vegetables, apple pie, instead of the usual elaborate desserts. No staff, no servers. My mother moved between the table and kitchen herself, and somehow that alone made the air easier to breathe. Finally, she sat down and folded her hands. "We saw your article," she said softly. "The one in Bloomberg, about the future of urban living." I nodded. "That was months ago. Your father reads it now," she said. "Every issue." I looked at him across the table. He didn't deny it. "I like to keep up," he muttered, cutting into his food. Marcus smirked. "You mean you like to see if she'll mention you again?" My father shot him a look, but even that felt half-hearted. Then he turned to me. "I've been thinking about something you said. About creation versus ownership." I raised an eyebrow. And maybe I spent my life confusing the two." That caught me off guard. My father wasn't one for confessions. His world ran on control and narrative. Admitting fault was something he considered a collapse of structure. But tonight, his voice was steady. "When I built my company," he said, "I thought I was shaping something permanent. Turns out, I was just managing the past. You—" He hesitated, searching for words. "You built the future." For a moment, the only sound was the soft ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner. "I wasn't trying to outdo you," I said quietly. "I know," he replied. "But you did anyway. And that's not an insult, that's evolution." My mother smiled, tears glinting at the edges of her eyes. "You have no idea how long I've waited to hear him say that." I laughed softly. "I think we all have a little less to build now." Marcus raised his glass. "To evolution, then." We clinked glasses, and for the first time in my life, the sound didn't feel hollow. Later after dinner, my father asked me to follow him to his study, the same room where he'd once told me I'd never belong in his world. The smell of old books and cedar oil filled the air, unchanged since my childhood. He walked to his desk, opened a drawer, and took out a manila envelope. "I've been holding on to this," he said, sliding it toward me. I frowned. "What is it?" "The deed to the mansion," he said simply. "It's yours now." I blinked. "What?" He smiled faintly. "I don't need it. Your mother and I are moving to a smaller place by the lake. Something quiet. Something earned. But this house, it's part of the family story. And I think you should decide what happens to it." I didn't reach for the envelope. "Dad, I don't need." "It's not about need," he interrupted. "It's about trust." The word hung in the air, heavy but clean. "Do what you want with it," he said. "Sell it, keep it, turn it into whatever you think it should be. Just promise me one thing. What's that build something here that means something? Don't let the walls just hold memories. Make them hold purpose." I finally took the envelope, my hands trembling slightly. "I promise." He nodded, once his eyes softer than I'd ever seen them. That's all I ever really wanted. When I stepped outside, a few minutes later, the night air hit cold and crisp. Marcus followed me to the driveway, hands in his pockets. "You know," he said, "for once, I think he actually meant it." "Yeah," I said quietly. "Me too." He glanced at the envelope. "So what are you going to do with it?" I looked up at the dark windows of the mansion, at the reflection of the city lights in the glass. "I don't know yet. Maybe something good." Marcus smiled. "You always do." I watched him walk back toward the house, then turned to my car. Before I got in, I took one last look at the mansion, the place that had once defined my failure, and now strangely symbolized something else entirely. By the time I got home, the envelope was still unopened beside me on the passenger seat. My mind raced with possibilities. As I parked outside my building, my phone buzzed with a message from Aria Echelon City, just past zoning approval. "You did it." Another text came right after from my mother. "He's proud, Emma. So am I. Thank you for coming home." I sat in silence, staring at both messages. The skyline glowed through my windshield, my towers, my reflection, my reminder. Home wasn't a place anymore. It was a choice, one I'd finally made for myself. I opened the envelope at last. Inside was the deed, yes, but also a handwritten note from my father. For the daughter who built what I could never imagine. Don't stop. The words blurred slightly as tears filled my eyes, not of sadness, but something cleaner release maybe. I leaned back, watching the city lights flicker across the glass. For the first time in years, I didn't feel the need to prove anything. The mansion, the towers, the company, they were all part of the same blueprint now. A story not about revenge, but about reclamation. The kind of victory that didn't shout. The kind that simply settled the foundation, quiet and permanent. The air outside City Hall buzzed with cameras and microphones before I even arrived. Reporters filled the marble steps, their voices overlapping in a sea of curiosity, tension, and expectation. The Chicago skyline stretched behind them, my towers gleaming faintly through the winter haze. It was the day Astra Development would announce Echelon City's official approval and construction timeline, a victory years in the making. But this wasn't just a business milestone. It was my moment to speak publicly, to define what this next chapter would mean for the city and for me. Noah met me by the entrance, his breath visible in the cold. "They're all here," he said. "CNN, Bloomberg, even the BBC. You ready?" I smiled. I've been ready for 10 years. The city's mayor, a composed woman in a navy coat, greeted me at the podium inside. "Ms. Carter," she said warmly. "This project will change lives. Chicago hasn't seen anything like it since Millennium Park." "That's the idea," I said. As we stepped out to face the crowd, the lights exploded, flashes popping like a sudden surge of raw energy, voices calling my name. I caught snippets of questions. "Emma, what inspired this? How do you respond to your critics? Is your father involved in the project?" That last one hit like a dart, but I didn't flinch. I'd expected it. The mayor gave her opening remarks first, her speech polished but sincere. She spoke of progress, sustainability, and inclusivity. When she finally turned to me, gesturing toward the podium, my pulse steadied. "Please welcome the visionary behind Astra Development and the woman reshaping our skyline, Ms. Emma Carter." Applause rose like a wall of sound, polite at first, then genuine. I stepped forward, the cold wind tugging at the hem of my coat. "Thank you," I began. My voice carried firm but calm. 5 years ago, Astra Development was an idea scribbled on a napkin in a cafe. Today, it's the foundation for a new way of living, not just in buildings, but in belief. The crowd quieted. Even the wind seemed to still. "Echelon City isn't just architecture," I continued. "It's a statement that innovation can coexist with empathy, that progress can serve people, not just profits. We're building homes that breathe, systems that heal, communities that connect." A murmur rippled through the crowd, approval, maybe surprise. Some said this was impossible, I said. That cities don't change, that people don't change. But I've learned that what they call impossible is usually just unfamiliar. The words flowed easier now, carried by something deeper than confidence, truth. I paused, scanning the crowd. Near the front row, I saw my mother standing quietly beside Marcus. My father wasn't with them, but I could feel him somewhere in the mix. His presence, his history, the weight of every argument that had brought me here. "People often ask me what success looks like," I said. "For me, it's not the towers or the numbers. It's this standing here in the city that once doubted me, now helping shape it." The applause rose again, louder this time. "But this project isn't about me," I said, lifting a hand. "It's about the next generation, the young architects, engineers, and dreamers who will inherit this skyline. To them, I say, build bravely, even if they tell you not to, especially if they tell you not to." A faint laugh rippled through the reporters. Someone in the back shouted, "Emma, is your family here today?" I hesitated only for a second. "Yes," I said simply. "And I hope they're proud." Then with a small smile I added, "Even if they don't always understand." The laughter turned to applause. After the speech, questions poured in. I answered what I could, deflected what I must. One reporter asked, Do you see Echelon City as revenge against those who underestimated you? I looked straight into the camera. No, I said. Revenge is temporary. Legacy is lasting. The soundbite would be everywhere by morning, but I didn't say it for the headlines. I said it for the girl I used to be, the one sitting at the Christmas dinner table, shrinking under her father's disapproval. When the press conference ended, I stepped back inside the marble foyer. The echo of applause still hummed in the air. My mother approached first, tears streaking her cheeks, despite her smile. "You were extraordinary," she whispered, taking my hands. "You sounded like me," I finished softly. She nodded. "Exactly like you." Marcus joined us, grinning. "You broke Dad's record for most cameras at one event. He'll love that." I laughed. "I'm sure he will." And then, as if summoned, my father appeared at the doorway, hands in his coat pockets, face unreadable. The crowd around us seemed to fade. "You were right," he said simply. I blinked. "About what?" "About creation," he said. "About control. About all of it." He stepped closer, his voice low. "I thought legacy was something you left behind. Turns out it's something you live long enough to witness." My throat tightened. "You came." "Of course I came," he said. "You're my daughter." He hesitated, then added, "And apparently, my teacher." The air between us shifted lighter, fragile, honest. "I don't want to erase what came before," I said quietly. "Just to rebuild it." He nodded slowly. "Then build it better." We stood there for a moment, surrounded by flashes and murmurs, the noise of history rearranging itself. Later that evening, I returned to the Echelon City site. The sun had dipped below the skyline, leaving the half-finished foundations bathed in a soft amber glow. Workers were gone, the place silent, except for the hum of the city. I walked the perimeter, the crunch of gravel beneath my boots echoing like punctuation. This was where everything converged, the pain, the triumph, the redemption. The city didn't care about my name or my past. It only cared that something new was being built. As I stood there, my phone buzzed. A message from Grandma's old number, now reassigned to my mother, but the name still showed as Nana. "Your father won't say it out loud, but he cried during your speech. You've done it, Emma. You've changed what Carter means." I smiled, tears pricking my eyes. "Not changed," I typed back. "Evolved." I slipped the phone into my pocket and looked up at the skyline, at the towers that once represented ambition and now stood as proof of transformation. The lights from Carter Towers flickered on one by one, like a new sequence of code being executed. The city was alive, pulsing, breathing, becoming. The kind of victory that didn't shout. The kind that simply settled the foundation, quiet and permanent. I left this house once with a throat full of words I never said. Now I walk back with no need to say them anymore. The air is cold but clean, the kind that makes silence sound almost kind. Snow drifts lazily across the driveway, softening the sharp edges of memory. The porch light burns steady, a quiet heartbeat against the winter dark. My mother opens the door before I can knock. No performance, no breathless welcome, just her in a wool cardigan and house shoes, looking like she's been waiting but not pacing. "You came," she says. I said I would. She steps aside. The warmth hits me first, then the smell, cinnamon, baked apples, pine. The house is smaller than I remember. Maybe it's because I finally stopped looking up to it. A garland leans slightly off-center on the staircase. The lights flicker unevenly. It's imperfect. I love that. The dining room is simple tonight. 4 plates, 4 chairs, no gold-trimmed settings, no towering centerpiece, just a table that looks lived at. My father stands when he sees me, clearing his throat. "Emma, Dad." Marcus grins from across the table. "Finally. We were about to start without you. You always did." He laughs, and the ice breaks the way old habits sometimes do not, with a crack, but with a sigh. Dinner starts slow. Roast chicken, green beans, warm rolls, and the apple pie I brought. For the first time, we ate without scripts. No one tries to impress anyone. The conversation drifts, work, whether small stories from small days. And underneath it all, something unfamiliar hums between us ease. Halfway through, my father sets his fork down. "You were on CNBC again," he says. "They called you the future of Chicago." I smile faintly. "I thought you didn't watch that channel." He shrugs. "Your mother does." She looks at me. He watches it first. He clears his throat. "Well, it's hard to avoid when you're on every other night," he conceded. I study him. His tone is light, but his eyes, there's something behind them I haven't seen before. Not pride exactly. Something quieter. Acceptance, maybe? "You know," he says, leaning back, "I used to think you were too young to understand the weight of things. Turns out I was too old to remember what they felt like." I tilt my head. That sounds dangerously close to an apology. He smiles, small and genuine. Maybe it is. My mother reaches for his hand across the table. "It's Christmas," she says softly. "Let's call it peace." For a while, we just sit there, the four of us, the sound of snow outside filling the pauses like punctuation. After dessert, my mother disappears into the hallway and comes back holding a small velvet box. She sets it in front of me. "Before you go," she says, "this belongs to you." Inside is a key old bronze heavy in my hand. The kind that belonged to a different century. "The house I ask." She nods. "The deed was paper. This is the real one." I turn it over in my palm. "You sure you're ready to let go?" My father answers for her. "We're not letting go," he says. "We're just passing it forward. What you do with it, that's up to you." "I don't need a house," I say quietly. "No," he says. "But you might need a beginning." Something catches in my chest, not grief, not joy. Something in between, something healed. "Then I'll make it one," I say. He nods. That's all I ever wanted to hear. We move into the living room for coffee. The fire burns low, throwing gentle gold across the walls. Marcus tells an old story about Christmas when he broke a window and blamed me. We all laugh, the deep kind that doesn't ask for forgiveness, but gives it anyway. Later, when I pull on my coat, my mother hugs me. It's not long, not tight, just right. She smells like vanilla and home. "You're welcome here," she whispers. "Not because you've succeeded, because you came back." I whisper back, "I know." On the porch, the snow has thickened. Marcus walks me to the car. His hands shoved into his coat pockets. He laughs softly. "You changed everything, Em. Not everything I say. Just enough." We stand there for a moment, snow collecting on the hoods of our coats, the world around us hushed. Then he squeezes my shoulder, nods, and heads back inside. I get into my car and start the engine, but I don't drive yet. The house glows behind me, warm through the falling snow. I open my phone and type a message to Lena. "The Carter House will reopen next fall as a mentorship space. You're leading the first class. Bring coffee and courage." Her reply comes almost immediately. "Always. Merry Christmas, boss." I smile, set the phone down, and glance toward the skyline. Carter Towers gleam through the haze, not as symbols anymore, but as statements. Proof that quiet persistence can outlast disbelief. I reach into my pocket and pull out the old key. Its metal is cool against my skin. I think of the girl I used to be, sitting in that same house trying to earn her family's faith, mistaking silence for failure. She wouldn't recognize me now. And that's the point. The snow falls thicker, blurring the edges of the world, until the city looks like a painting. I take one last breath, deep and steady, and whisper to the night, "Here's to the doors we built ourselves." And as the car eases forward, headlights cutting through the white, I don't look back at the house. Some homes you leave, some you rebuild, and some you finally outgrow just enough to make space for the next woman who needs a key. If this story found you, tell me what door you're building. Leave a comment, share it with someone still standing outside. We build better when we build together. Then I drive on snow, whispering against the windshield, the city lights ahead steady, and waiting, the kind of glow that never asks for permission.